Can you hear me? I don't know that we need a lot of volume, but are we good? All right, well, good. Well, thank you all for being here on this beautiful day. I know it's a little chilly, but it was supposed to be 45 and raining, so we'll take 47 and sunny, and this backdrop is really why we're here. The regatta happening, it could be, we didn't time that, but you know, I'm glad to see my alma mater down there out on the water. Before we get started, I'm Michael Mills, running for New York State Senate District 54. Again, thank you for being here. We're going to talk about one of the most important issues of this campaign, and that's protecting and promoting our lakes. But I first want to point out there is an election happening in just over a week. Early voting started yesterday. We must get good candidates elected. Local government matters now more than ever, and so you have time in the coming weeks, a week, to get out there, get your friends, your neighbors, ask them their voting plan, get them to go. And we actually have at least one candidate here, two candidates here today. Thank you guys, Keenan, Doug, thanks for your service, thanks for running, good luck, and let's help them get there. But I want to start talking about this campaign and what we're doing today. We're only going to take a couple minutes. It's not going to be long because of the weather, but we've got this sunny day. We're going to take advantage to talk about the lake. I want to talk about some policy issues and some policy pillars that are going to guide my work in the Senate. So our local waterways provide drinking water for nearly 2 million residents, from Syracuse to Rochester and the Finger Lakes in between. The lakes are vital economic engines, providing life to a nearly $4 billion annual tourism industry, which funds nearly 70,000 jobs. We've got one of our great wine producers here who is benefiting from this water and providing jobs in our region. And of course, these lakes provide enjoyment for people who fish, swim, boat, kayak, or simply sit here and admire the waterways. We're so fortunate to live among these extraordinary bodies of water that were carved by glaciers millions of years ago. Yet most of us take for granted that these lakes will be here to sustain us. And as a result, we don't understand how fragile they are, and the work of so many who fight every day to understand and protect our lakes. Many of you right here who are on different lake coalitions and lake boards fighting for our waterways. So I want to talk about science for a second if we can, and let's talk about harmful algal blooms, or HABs, as one example of the unpredictability and fragility of our waterways. Like the other lake threats and challenges our state faces, which I'll talk about in a second, we must invest resources to combat HABs, both in our region and across all of New York State. So let's talk HABs for a second. These intense concentrations of cyanobacteria are harmful because they produce toxins that attack the liver, brain, kidneys, and reproductive organs. The accumulation of these toxins in our waterways threaten not only the health and lives of pets, wildlife, and humans that consume contaminated water, but they also the entire aquatic ecosystem that gives lives to our lakes, including fish, insects, invertebrates, birds. Because of their toxicity, HABs endanger public drinking water. And these supplies that, and the lakes around them that force closures of public beaches, harm our local tourism, reduce recreational enjoyment, and lower property values in the communities around our lakes. You know, HABs were once rare in New York. In fact, the first bloom in the Finger Lakes was reported 11 years ago. And now they're in all 11 lakes, and they become commonplace in reservoirs, ponds, coastal areas across the state. So why does this matter to me personally? I grew up swimming at Ontario Beach Park in Charlotte. In summers, we'd walk down the pier having a Abbott's banana milkshake on a warm or cold summer evening. And as a first year at Hobart College, right down the lake here, I had the good fortune of taking Intro to Geology. My teammates on the hockey team pejoratively called it rocks for jocks. We packed into vans and measured stream discharge rates in Kashong Creek. We explored chimney bluffs on the shores of Lake Ontario. We took Sankey disc measurements on Seneca Lake aboard the HWS Explorer. These are incredible moments that are indelible in my memory, and I want my son Lewis to experience that as he gets older. Hey, buddy. He normally says, hey, he's talking about me, so we've got him doing something else right now. And I want to make sure that happens. And so the health and well-being of Lake Ontario and the Finger Lakes needs to be a top priority for anyone representing this district. And it's not right now. Our senator shows up once in a while to talk about a bill that someone else is carrying. We know she doesn't have a seat at the table, but this is not her top priority, and it will be for me. Our lakes, our lives. I say this all the time. How go the health of our lakes will go our current and our future. And that's why we're here today. I'm announcing that Our Lakes, Our Lives policy pillars and some specific legislative actions that I'm going to carry in Albany when I'm sworn in to represent the 54th District. So let's start with 4 pillars. These are going to underpin the things we do when we look at policy. 1, the quality of our lake water is inextricably linked to the quality of their watersheds. That's the water that feeds into these bodies. Watersheds that lack the capacity to retain and filter rainwater allow large volumes of runoff that brings silt, pesticides, toxins, fertilizers, and animal waste and other substances into our lake. And so, New York must invest in wetlands preservation projects on Lake Ontario and the Finger Lakes region to preserve the natural capital of watersheds that feed our lakes. 2, we know that the one root cause of CAP outbreaks is the presence of nutrient fertilizers and animal waste in our lakes, and that a large share of this input is from our farms. We must develop meaningful relationships and dialogue with our agriculture community to ensure partnerships and not adversarial relationships and ramping up that blame game. Our farmers and our producers care about the environment, and we shouldn't demonize them. We need to bring them into the process while still protecting these vital waterways. 3, we know that large industrial facilities like Greenidge generation plant on Seneca Lake with its enormous energy demands on our power grid also harm our lakes. We must demand stronger enforcement of environmental protections around these types of plant operations and stand up for our lakes and existing climate laws. 4, we must invest in creating the next generation of advocates, like so many of you here today. We must invest in K-12 programs and community-based workshops that promote lake-friendly living and other public awareness and conservation efforts. All right, so we're going to talk policy. So we won't nerd out too much. I know, Doug, we like to do that, but we'll go a little into our policy here. These are the things that are happening in the legislative session that we're going to carry on and try to push for. We must call upon the New York Assembly to pass the Harmful Algal Bloom Monitoring and Prevention Act. It was passed in the Senate and it's stalled in the Assembly, and we must get it across the finish line. This bill provides a critical, centralized clearinghouse of data, including potential and known causes, best practices in interventions, available expertise, and funding resources. 2, we must ensure that residents and local communities have a voice during the ongoing review of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence River Adaptive Management International Joint Committee Plan. This is the legislation that was created, the international agreement in 2014, coming out of the most recent flooding that happened there. It regulates Lake Ontario water levels, and we must the plan must better share the risks across all levels of stakeholders at that water, whether it's high level or low level. We need to have better sharing of that impact. 3, we must continue to educate state and federal political leaders and policymakers about how to implement Storm Act legislation. This provides low-interest loans for shoreline property resilience. I grew up in Greece, and I remember my neighbors and my friends who were devastated by that flooding, and they've had to make massive investments in protecting that waterfront, and we need to make sure those funds are available. 4, we must pass the Drinking Water Protection Act, currently before both the Assembly and the Senate. The bill proposes to strengthen protections for public drinking water supplies by modernizing the framework for watershed rules and regulations. It ensures timely updates, and it equips the Department of Health and water suppliers with clearer tools for prevention, enforcement, and accountability. As a member of the Canandaigua City Council, I believe that our local governments are incredibly equipped to tackle this. Our partnership with the town, the city, we've done an amazing job of investing in protecting and creating flood resilience. And so I want to ensure that there is local flexibility, local leadership, but we must create an agency that's driving funding and support. And lastly, again, as we experience firsthand in Canandaigua, flooding is more prevalent and more dangerous than ever before because of climate change. I'm sorry, folks, climate change is real, and we must say that, and we must stand up to do the things that are necessary to adapt to it. We are going to be a place that people from all over the world, certainly in America, move to as the climate continues to change. I think of my brother who lives in Florida, and he's paying $17,000 a year in home insurance, which won't exist in 3 years. He's going to need a place to move. Hopefully he'll come back and spend more time with us, but we've got to be prepared for that, economically and environmentally. And so we must pass the Office of Flooding and Prevention and Mitigation Act that, among other things, will create an office to study and coordinate responses to flooding in New York. So I'm not just, we're in the home stretch here, folks. I'm not just passionate about protecting our lakes. I also have experience working on water policy. I own a public affairs firm, and for nearly 3 decades, I've worked on a range of issues at the federal, state, and local level, from protecting rural hospitals to juvenile justice, economic development, and a range of climate change issues. But I want to tell you about one experience that highlights my work and why I'll carry that to the Senate and how I'll be impactful. I helped the state of Georgia create its first water planning district. I'm going to go through a little history here to make you understand why this is important and the lessons I learned from it. In 2000, the city of Atlanta was under $1 million a day consent decree from the federal government and the EPA for failing to meet total daily limits for fecal matter. So in other words, they were being fined $1 million a day because their water was polluted. The money, infrastructure, and political will simply did not exist to fix the problem. So in stepped the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, and they built a coalition of environmentalists, elected officials, business leaders, who came together to study the issue and to figure out what we could do. And I ran public affairs for that group, managing stakeholder outreach and communications and the public affairs creation. So at the time, I'm going to share something that may seem totally infeasible, but it's true. At the time, Atlanta was the largest community in the history of civilization getting its water from the smallest body. Big city, tiny body. As my wife, Audrey, a native of Atlanta, can tell you, in the summer, you can literally walk across the Chattahoochee River, and that's where their water comes from. And so after 6 months of work, the coalition came together, created a recommendation for a water planning district. They created it, we launched it into the legislative session, and it passed and became an active body in 2001. It was a truly historic milestone, and it taught me a few critical things that are going to guide my work in Albany. First, we must educate and unite a broad coalition of stakeholders who have a vested interest in the well-being of our lakes and activate them to garner the necessary attention in Albany. And that's what so many of you do every day, and I need to support you. Right now, you do not have a senator who's convening those bodies, who's bringing you together, who's being a champion, and that's what I'm going to do. Second, we must be relentless in fighting to make our voices heard and give voice to this lake, to Lake Ontario, and all the other Finger Lakes. And lastly, it is imperative to set a bold vision for environmental policy, but we can't let perfect be the enemy of good, especially as it relates to these lakes. Good policy progress now is better than the perfect plan never. I want us to set bold visions. I want us to work to them, and I'm going to fight every yard to get us into that end zone, but we have to go a step at a time and continue to be relentless. And so, let's remember, our lakes, our lives. How go Ontario, Seneca, Canandaigua, Canadice, Honeoye, Hemlock, and Canisius go our very present and our future. And together, we must ensure that these lakes have a voice in Albany and that our communities rise together. I want to be your voice. With your support, I will be your voice, and we will fight for these lakes. Thank you for being here.